Imagine a battlefield, not far from London, a summer morning, 1485. The sun is rising, and so is the smell of blood. A king lies dead. Not just any king, the last of his name. His crown has rolled off his head into the mud, not gently, like a passing of power, but violently. And as his enemies gather around, victorious, the land changes hands. Again, this moment would end a war that had raged for over 30 years. But how did it begin? Why did cousins kill cousins? Why did queens lead armies? Why did England eat itself alive over a rose? Let's go back to the first crack in the wall. The year is 1377. King Edward III is dead. He was a powerful king, a warrior, a builder of empire, and a father of many. And that was the problem. He had 5 sons who lived to adulthood, and 5 royal sons meant 5 royal families, all with their own children, ambitions, and claims to the throne. Think of it like this. You have a powerful company. The CEO dies. But instead of one clear heir, 5 board members think they should be next. What happens? Meetings turn to arguments. Arguments turn to war. That's what happened with England. The Plantagenet family tree didn't grow straight. It split and twisted and tangled. And out of this twisted tree came 2 deadly branches, the House of Lancaster and the House of York. These 2 houses were cousins. They smiled in public, married into each other's families, attended the same churches, the same coronations, the same funerals, but under the surface, there was silence, tension, like air before a storm. The House of Lancaster, marked by the red rose, claimed descent through John of Gaunt, Edward III's 3rd son. The House of York, symbolized by the white rose, descended from Lionel of Antwerp, Edward III's 2nd son. And here lies the spark. If Lionel was older, shouldn't his descendants have had the better claim? That question, technical, confusing, buried in royal paperwork, would later become the reason thousands would die. But it didn't start with a war. It started with a theft. In 1399, something happened that shocked the kingdom. King Richard II, the grandson of Edward III, was overthrown by his own cousin. That cousin was Henry Bolingbroke. He wasn't next in line, but he was strong, popular, armed, so he did the unthinkable. He took the crown by force. He became Henry IV, and from that moment on, no king's seat was safe. You see, before this, kings were believed to rule by divine right. God chose them, but Henry IV changed the game. He proved a man with power could rewrite the rules, and everyone was watching, especially the House of York. Henry IV ruled with paranoia, rebellions, plots, conspiracies. He faced them all. His son, Henry V, inherited the throne in 1413, and for a while, everything changed. Henry Thameb was a war hero. At the Battle of Agincourt, he led the English to one of their greatest victories. It was muddy, it was raining, but English archers, with longbows like wooden machine guns, ripped through French armor like paper. Henry Thameb became a legend, but legends don't live forever. In 1422, he died suddenly, age 35. His son, Henry VI, was just a baby, 9 months old, and England was now ruled by a crib. Henry VI grew up kind, quiet, deeply religious, but he was not a leader. Think of him like a soft poet, thrown into a world of knives. He hated war, hated politics, hated confrontation, and in a world of ambitious lords and hungry barons, that was dangerous. As he got older, things got worse. Taxes rose, crops failed, nobles fought over land. The government, run by greedy favorites and corrupt courtiers, lost control. Then came Calais, the last English stronghold in France. Lost. Then came rumors. Henry was not just weak, he was unwell. In 1453, Henry VI suffered a mental collapse. For over a year, he said nothing, didn't recognize people, didn't react, didn't rule. The court fell into chaos. There was no king, and when the king disappears, someone always steps forward. That man was Richard, Duke of York, a brilliant general, a respected noble, and a man who believed deeply that the throne was his by right. Remember, Richard was descended from Edward III's second son, while the Lancasters, Henry VI's line, came from the third son. Technically, Richard had the stronger bloodline, and now the king was broken, the country leaderless, so Richard made his move. He didn't claim the throne, not yet. He simply asked to be made protector of the realm. While Henry was unwell, Parliament agreed. Richard was now England's ruler in all but name, but not everyone was happy, especially not Queen Margaret of Anjou, Henry VI's wife. Margaret was no ordinary queen. She was fierce, intelligent, political, and she was a mother. Her son, Edward, was the heir, and she feared, rightly, that Richard would try to take the crown for himself. So while Richard ruled with a calm hand, Margaret began gathering allies, nobles, mercenaries. The court split, one half with York, one half with Lancaster. It was a powder keg. In May 1455, the powder keg exploded. At St. Albans, Yorkist and Lancastrian forces clashed. It was not a massive battle, more a street fight, but it was the first time Englishmen had killed Englishmen for the crown in this war. Lancastrian leaders were slain. Henry VI was captured, again unable to resist. Richard, once again, was made protector, but this time, Queen Margaret would not forgive. The blood had been spilled. The roses had drawn swords. What began as a political argument was now a civil war, and it wouldn't be settled in courtrooms or councils. It would be settled on battlefields, in ditches, in towers, in whispers, and as families chose sides, red or white, no one could remain neutral, not even the common folk. A boy king will rise, only to fall. A queen will raise armies, while a noble becomes a kingmaker. But in the shadows, betrayal waits. Sleep well, if you can. He stares into space. The room is silent. The king does not speak. He does not move. He doesn't flinch when courtiers call his name. He doesn't blink when his wife enters the room, trembling. The child inside her womb has kicked, but the father doesn't notice. This is England's king, and he has vanished into his own mind. Outside, nobles argue, soldiers sharpen blades, towns prepare for siege. The king's silence is not peace. It is the beginning of war. In August 1453, the unimaginable happened. King Henry VI, fragile, peaceful, deeply religious, suddenly collapsed mentally. For over a year, he was catatonic. He said nothing, responded to no one. His mind vanished like a candle blown out. No king, no leadership, no command, just silence. Imagine an airplane, and the pilot suddenly lets go of the controls mid-flight. The kingdom was spiraling. In this vacuum stepped the ever-patient Richard, Duke of York. He saw opportunity, but not with greed. Richard believed he was saving England from collapse. Parliament named him protector of the realm once more. He was cautious, careful. He avoided wearing royal symbols. He did not call himself king, yet power was his. He replaced corrupt courtiers, restored order to towns, reopened council meetings long shut by fear, and many whispered, should he not be king already? But while Richard ruled, Queen Margaret of Anjou prepared for war. She had given birth to a son, Edward of Westminster, the Prince of Wales. Her son, not Richard's, was heir to the throne, and she knew what Richard wanted. Power may be borrowed, she thought, but it is rarely returned willingly. Margaret was no quiet queen. She gathered nobles, spread rumors, made alliances in the shadows. She would defend her son's birthright at any cost. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was personal. In 1455, Henry VI woke up. He recovered from his catatonia. Barely, but the damage was done. Richard was forced to step down as protector. His enemies, those close to the Queen, returned to court. Titles revoked, lands taken, threats made. Richard realized something chilling. They won't let me walk away. Peace was shattered, and soon, swords would be drawn. On May 22nd, 1455, the streets of St. Albans filled with shouts and steel. Richard, along with his ally, Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, later called the Kingmaker, faced down the Queen's loyalists. The king himself was in the town, guarded, helpless. The battle was short, brutal, and intimate. Fought in narrow lanes. Henry VI was wounded, taken prisoner once again. Richard became protector, but now the blood had stained England's soil. A cycle had begun. There would be no more turning back. With Margaret in retreat, the House of York grew stronger. Richard allied with powerful nobles. Warwick the Kingmaker, brilliant and unpredictable. His own son, Edward, Earl of March, young, tall, bold. Together, they were no longer just defenders of order. They were contenders for the throne. England began to split. In the north, the Lancasters, under Margaret. In the south, York and his allies. Families were forced to choose. Brothers joined opposing armies. Fathers turned on sons. Towns were burned, villages looted, fields soaked in blood. What was once politics was now civil war. But Margaret was not finished. In 1459, she launched a counter-strike. At the Battle of Ludford Bridge, York's army broke ranks. He fled to Ireland. Warwick escaped to Calais. The Queen was back in power. She called a parliament at Coventry, where she condemned York as a traitor. His lands seized. His allies executed. His name tainted. But Margaret made a mistake. She left the people starving, and she left Warwick alive. In 1460, Warwick and York's son Edward returned with a fury. Their army struck Northampton, capturing King Henry VI again. Margaret and her son fled north, and now York returned to London. But this time, he made a move no one expected. On October 10th, 1460, Richard marched into Parliament and placed his hand on the throne. Silence. Lords were stunned. He wasn't protector anymore. He was claiming kingship. But not everyone agreed. After debate, a compromise was reached. Richard would not depose Henry VI, but he would become heir to the throne, disinheriting Henry's son, Prince Edward. It was a peaceful answer to a bloody problem, but Margaret would never accept it. In December 1460, as winter fell, Queen Margaret gathered her northern allies and struck back. Richard of York rode north to meet her, and at Wakefield, he met his end. His head was put on a spike, wearing a paper crown. The Kingmaker's rise had begun. The rightful heir was dead, but his son, Edward of March, now had more reason than ever to fight. The next battles would not be for balance. They would be for total power. 2 boys vanish, a crown is stolen, and a nation holds its breath. London, summer of 1483. The bells of Westminster Abbey ring, but there's no celebration. The mood is heavy. In the Tower of London, once a fortress, now a prison, two boys wait. One is barely 12 years old, the other just 9. They are the sons of a king, but within months they will disappear, and no one will ever see them again. Edward V, the eldest son of the late King Edward IV, had just inherited the throne, but he was only a child, and in medieval England, power-hungry men surrounded child kings like wolves around a lamb. The man who stepped forward to protect the young king, his own uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. "I will keep the boy safe," Richard promised. But safety came with conditions. He moved Edward and his brother Richard to the Tower of London. It was supposed to be temporary, just until Edward's coronation. But the coronation never came. At first, people believed the boys were being prepared for the throne, but days turned into weeks, then into months. The boys stopped appearing in public. No more smiles from the windows, no more footsteps in the yard. Whispers filled the streets. Where are the princes? Why hasn't the coronation happened? Why is Richard still calling himself Lord Protector? And then, without warning, Richard declared the princes illegitimate. He claimed their parents' marriage was invalid, that Edward was not the rightful king. He took the throne for himself. He became Richard III. Imagine being Edward, just 12. One day, you're a prince, crowned in your dreams. The next, locked in stone walls, your crown snatched by the very man who vowed to protect you. And little Richard, only 9, following his brother's every move, not fully understanding the dark storm closing in. Some said the boys were smothered in their sleep. Some claimed they were poisoned. Others believed they were secretly rescued, hidden away in distant lands, but no one really knew. Their last confirmed sighting, summer of 1483, behind the walls of the tower. After that, silence. When Richard took the throne, the country was uneasy. Yes, he ruled, but everywhere he went, shadows followed. He was loved by some. He reformed laws. He supported the poor, but the ghost of the boys haunted him at every feast. Behind every curtain, people whispered, "Did he do it?" Even the nobles who once supported him began to doubt, because power taken unjustly never lasts. Centuries later, in 1674, workers at the tower found 2 small skeletons beneath a staircase. Were they the lost princes? No one could say for sure. The bones were moved to Westminster Abbey, buried under a marble slab that reads, "Here lie the remains of 2 children." That's it. No names, no justice. So, who killed the princes? Richard III is the most accused. He had the motive. He wanted the crown, and the boys vanished under his watch. But some argue Henry Tudor, who would later become Henry VII, had just as much to gain. If the boys were alive, they could challenge his claim later. Others point fingers at the Duke of Buckingham, a once loyal supporter of Richard, who later turned against him. Even centuries later, no theory fits perfectly. No evidence is solid. It's like trying to complete a puzzle with missing pieces. But one thing is certain. 2 innocent lives vanished, and a crown was born of silence. The story of the princes in the tower isn't just a mystery. It's a reminder, in the Game of Thrones, truth is fragile, and the price of power is often paid in blood. Richard III would only rule for 2 years, but in that short time, guilt, suspicion, and betrayal would eat away at the crown he fought so hard to wear. And then, on a muddy battlefield at Bosworth, a new king would rise, and the Wars of the Roses would reach their dramatic, bloody end. August 22nd, 1485. The storm is coming, but it's not in the sky. It's in the hearts of 2 men, both born of blood and ambition. One, a king desperate to hold on to his crumbling crown. The other, an exile with nothing to lose. This is the final breath of the Plantagenets and the first heartbeat of the Tudors. Richard III sits on a throne that wobbles beneath him, not from wood or craft, but from ghosts, the ghosts of his nephews, Edward and Richard, the princes in the tower. The whispers won't stop. Did Richard kill them? Some say yes, some say no, but everyone agrees. Power has a price. He has ruled for just 2 years, but each night he sleeps like a man lying next to a sword. The nobility is divided, loyalty is fragile, and in the distance, a sail cuts through the channel. Henry Tudor is coming. Henry Tudor, a name barely whispered in court for years. A boy raised in exile, far away in Brittany, under the care of foreign kings. He doesn't even know what England smells like, but he knows this. His claim, though thin, is strong enough. His cause, just believable enough. And most of all, the people are tired. Tired of betrayal, tired of shifting alliances, tired of blood running like rivers in their streets. Henry has one weapon, more powerful than an army: hope. It's early morning. Mist curls low over the ground at Bosworth. Richard rides out with confidence, an army at his back, banners high. But there's a sickness in the ranks. Some nobles are lukewarm, some are waiting, watching, choosing a side with their eyes instead of their swords. Henry's forces are outnumbered, but battle is not just about numbers. It's about momentum, about belief, and Henry has one secret card to play: Lord Stanley. The Stanleys are powerful, and they've promised Richard their support, but they are also Henry's step-family. So when the battle begins, all eyes are on Stanley. Which way will he go? As the sun breaks through the clouds, Richard sees his chance. Henry is exposed, just a handful of men protecting him. Richard lowers his lance, spurs his horse. He charges. This is it. He believes he can win. Not just the battle, but the war, with this one stroke. And then, Lord Stanley makes his move. Stanley's men descend like thunder. Richard is surrounded. He fights. They say he killed a standard-bearer with his own hands. They say he cried, "Treason, treason," but no one came. He died like a king, but he died. Richard's body is dragged from the battlefield, thrown over a horse like luggage, buried in a plain grave with no honor. For 500 years, no one knew where he lay. It wasn't until 2012, under a parking lot in Leicester, that he was found. His spine curved, skull cracked, and yet, in that shallow grave, a chapter of English history finally closed. Henry Tudor is crowned King Henry VII. He marries Elizabeth of York, uniting the red rose and the white. The wars of the roses are over. The thorns still remain. But for now, there is peace. A new dynasty is born. And so ends a tale of ambition, betrayal, loyalty, and legacy. Of men who fought for crowns, of women who paid the price, of battles won and souls lost. But the war never truly ends. It just changes faces.